I actually, because there's probably people on this call who've never heard of IJM, and then there's others who maybe know IJM a little bit or well, I was hoping to start with a brief intro video of who we are and what we do. Again, this is technology, so who knows if it's going to work for us, but I'm going to attempt to play that video. If there is any issue, will someone just unmute themselves and say, it is not working, and we can just scratch the video. But we will go to that and see where we get.
So this is the target establishment. First suspect, view for our victims.
And remember, if there's a hazard or dangerous situation, move yourself to a position of cover.
We've handed him over to the police. We saw about 1,200 little kids and found out that they were in fact trafficked and they were in fact slaves. These little kids were on this boat. They are not fed. They are abused beyond imagination. We got Joshua.
This is the girl. Whenever something like this comes, I imagine in my mind that girl is found.
We have operations all over the world, rescuing people from slavery. Because today there are criminals who abuse children, sell girls.
How old is she? 12. 12? How much? 30? Yeah, I'm afraid.
And force families into slavery. Criminals prey on the easiest target, the world's poor, because they expect no one to defend them.
Pareho po tayong mga tao. Hindi po tayo bagay or hayop na pwedeng gamitin lang sa pansarili.
But today, there are thousands of people gathering to seek justice for those in slavery. We are a group of lawyers, counselors, activists, and supporters. We are called International Justice Mission. And together, we form the largest international anti-slavery organization in the world. But slavery won't come to an end until criminals know they can't get away with it. So we partner with local police to arrest and prosecute criminals. This sends a message to slave owners. We will not go away. We stay with the survivors until they are healed, until they are free.
Natulungan po ako ng IJM sa pamamagitan po na sa case ko, sa pagtulong po nila na ma-overcome ko po yung fear.
Each year, we rescue thousands of slaves and protect millions around the world. We are transforming how justice systems protect their citizens. To those who are still enslaved, we promise to find you. We will get you home to your families so you can have the freedom you deserve.
So as you can see, IJM's mission is to protect people in poverty from violence by rescuing victims, bringing the criminals to justice, restoring survivors to safety and strength, and then helping local law enforcement build a safe future that will last. And one of the kind of key words in that whole paragraph is violence. So the violence that IJM focuses on is not the more explosive violence of war or genocide. It is the more everyday criminal violence that is already against the laws in the countries that, pretty much in every country, but specifically in the countries that we work in. Crimes like slavery, violence against women and children, and police abuse of power. And the vast majority of IJM's work is in the space of protecting people from human trafficking, slavery, bonded labor, sex trafficking, all of those crimes. But this everyday violence is a threat, and to especially those living in poverty around the world. And it's as much a part of poverty as is hunger or lack of clean water or disease, et cetera. And this kind of reality of everyday violence, just to give you the scope of it, according to the United Nations, they did a report a number of years ago that said there are 4 billion people, so basically half the world's population, lives outside the protection of the law. And for someone like me in the United States, my context is just so different that can be hard for me to even get my head around. But the reality is that for those 4 billion people, they are living in communities where there are laws written on the books intended to protect them in their countries. But the issue is that there is no real law enforcement. And so when that's the reality, criminals are allowed to operate with just complete impunity because they've never seen someone held accountable for their crimes. They've never seen someone given a fine or prison time for a crime like sexually assaulting a child or trafficking another human being or enslaving another human being. So when criminals are allowed to operate with complete impunity, those who are vulnerable and specifically who are living in poverty are incredibly susceptible to violence. But at IJM, we have a solution of how we address that violence. So as you can see here, IJM protects people in poverty from violence by partnering with the local justice system in the communities in which we work to do 4 key things. And that's, as you can see here, strengthen justice systems, rescue and restore victims, bring criminals to justice, and scale demand for justice. So I'm going to dive into each of those a tiny bit, and then we'll carry on. But if there's any questions, I'm happy to chat more about those at the end. But so strengthen justice systems. We collaborate with community leaders and justice system officials, from police to judges and other social service agencies in the community, to really holistically and effectively address violence in those communities. So we come together and we design improvements that serve survivors, that deter criminals, and then that dramatically decrease the prevalence rates of those crimes that we are focusing on. Second, we rescue and restore victims. So our teams on the ground, our social workers and investigators, actually work with police to go and help rescue victims from the situation of violence they find themselves in. And then our social workers walk with those survivors until they're restored. So our social workers are providing direct trauma-focused therapy and care to these survivors over the years of their restoration process. But then they also act as a caseworker in those communities to ensure that all of the holistic needs of those survivors are met, so that those survivors can eventually become fully restored and then reintegrate back into their society in a way where they can be safe and stable and then have the opportunity to thrive. So some of those, like I said, our staff directly address trauma-focused therapy and care, but we also ensure that needs like health care or medical visits, housing issues, education, if it's a child and they need to be re-enrolled in school, or they need vocational training or a small business loan. Our staff will work with other great and trusted nonprofits and social service agencies in the community to ensure that that survivor really has all of what they need to be restored. Third, we bring criminals to justice. So we walk alongside the justice system in these communities to ensure that criminals are held accountable for their crimes, which helps stop the cycle of violence, and it deters other would-be criminals from abusing the vulnerable. I believe it was Simon earlier who spoke about the money side of it. And what we have seen in our work is that criminals, especially in the realm of human trafficking and sex trafficking and slavery, they are doing this work because they can get away with it, and there is a profit. Criminals are really doing a cost benefit analysis, essentially, to put it in those terms. And what they find is that when they're living in a community where their laws aren't enforced, and like I said before, they've never seen a criminal held accountable for crimes like what they're doing, there really is no cost to them. they get to make money and not have a fear of consequence. But what we have found is that when the justice system starts working really effectively and to churn and actually arrest a significant number of people and to have those cases go through the system, and those people actually end up paying fines and or spend time in prison, what we've seen is that not only do prevalence rates of the crime drop, but other criminals and active criminals sort of get out of the game, so to speak, because the cost benefit analysis has totally changed. So that's bringing criminals to justice. And then lastly, we scale demand for protection. So we convene and equip champions to advocate for protection as an essential and tangible future for everyone. So that scale demand for protection is work that we do across the globe. And that's really convening everyone from individuals across the world to churches and corporations, governments, et cetera. So that can be an interesting model to hear about, but I find that the question is always, or should probably always be, but is it effective? And so I would love to share with you just one case study from multiple in our work that shows you the impact of what our work is actually capable of. So in Cebu in the Philippines in 2006, IJM was given a grant from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. It was a 4-year grant, and the aim of that was to reduce the prevalence rate of minors in the sex industry who'd been trafficked into the sex industry by 20%. So the goal over those 4 years was to reduce it by 20%. As you can see, at the end of 4 years, outside auditors actually found that there had been a 72% reduction rate in the prevalence of minors that were trafficked into the sex industry. So that was really incredible results to get. And we were really encouraged by them, but we are also a bunch of data nerds at IJM. So we are very dedicated to monitoring and research and evaluation and what the data actually says. So we were really encouraged by those results, but we also wanted to make sure that those results could actually be attributed to IJM's model of working with the justice system and really shoring that up, just to make sure that it wasn't, a set of circumstances that was happening in Cebu, Philippines at that time, regardless of whether IJM had been there or not. So how do you test something like that? You replicate it. So we replicated this in Manila from 2009 to 2016, also in the Philippines, and found a 75% reduction rate in the prevalence of minors that had been sex trafficked. And then in Pampanga, we did the same thing, also in the Philippines, ran it from 2012 to 2016, and we found that there'd been an 86% reduction rate in the prevalence of minors. And since that time, we've seen similar reduction rates come in from our work around the globe, from Uganda to Guatemala, and in different casework types. And that's what's been really critical, is that our model has been tested and proven effective, but not just in one specific area, though we were very encouraged to see how effective it really was in the realm of protecting children from sex trafficking, but it's been proven effective across geography and casework type. And that's been really encouraging and has allowed us to implement this model across the globe then. So then the next logical question is, so where do you actually work? So here is the map of where we work. The orange, as you can see, is our global headquarters outside Washington, D.C. The light blue are offices where we do fundraising and advocacy work. And then the really dark navy color is where we're actually implementing this 4-part model I told you about and doing casework in those places. So we actually have 20 offices around the globe. We have about 1,000 employees worldwide. And those employees are lawyers, investigators, social workers, and then, a bunch of other business professionals. You got to have HR and finance and all that good stuff. So they are really amazing, trained experts in their field that are working on behalf of those in poverty and giving their absolute best. And that is what the poor deserve and what they so rarely get. So that is a little bit about our staff. Something that's really important to know is that 95% of our staff are nationals to the country that they work in. So Guatemalans are working in Guatemala, and Kenyans are working in Kenya, and Cambodians are working in Cambodia. So the last thing I wanted to just touch on is that we are a faith-based organization as well. So we are motivated by God's heart for justice, and we serve people regardless of race, gender, religion, ethnicity, etc. So what IJM specifically is focusing on, like I said, is violence. But as that relates to human trafficking and sex trafficking and slavery issues, like I said, this model has worked really well and has been effective. And we are really determined, and a bit of what I heard Simon saying too, our goal is to end this, to end trafficking and slavery in the world. And we feel like it is possible. It's going to take the whole globe getting on board to do it. But we are really encouraged by that. So that is what I've got. I will stop